The dagger slipped from my trembling fingers, clattering against the marble floor of my father's study. Blood pooled beneath Uncle Marcus's body, spreading like spilled wine across the imported tiles he'd been so proud of. The assassin I'd hired stood motionless in the corner, awaiting my final command while my family, my tormentors, cowered behind overturned furniture, their faces pale with the realization that their patron, their protector, their enabler, was dead. "You're insane!" my sister Celeste shrieked, her perfectly manicured nails digging into our brother Julian's arm. "You've killed us all!" I laughed, a sound that bubbled up from somewhere deep and wounded inside me. "No, dear sister, I've set us free. Though I suspect you won't see it that way for quite some time." The assassin moved forward, silent as smoke, and placed a small velvet pouch in my hand. "Your change, my lady. The contract is complete." I stared at the pouch, feeling the weight of 3 gold coins inside. After everything, after spending my last copper on this desperate gambit, he was returning part of my payment. "But I gave you everything I had." "You gave me what you could afford to lose," he said quietly, his voice barely audible beneath his hood. "What remains is what you need to begin again." As sirens wailed in the distance, I thought back to how it had all begun 6 months ago, when I'd discovered the truth about my inheritance and the depths of my family's betrayal. The reading of my grandmother's will should have been my salvation. For 23 years, I'd endured my family's cruelty, sustained only by the knowledge that grandmother Ilara had loved me, had seen through their facades to recognize my worth. While my parents lavished gifts and opportunities on Celeste and Julian, I'd survived on scraps and hand-me-downs, told repeatedly that I should be grateful for even that much. "Ellsworth and Associates, how may I direct your call?" The receptionist's voice had been crisp that morning, unaware she was about to deliver news that would shatter my world. "This is Lydia Brennan. I'm calling about my grandmother's estate. The reading was scheduled for today?" There was a pause, papers shuffling. "I'm sorry, Ms. Brennan, but that reading occurred 3 weeks ago. All beneficiaries were present." My heart stopped. "That's impossible. I'm a beneficiary. I was never notified." "Let me check. According to our records, you were marked as present. Your signature is on the attendance sheet." The room spun around me. I gripped the edge of my desk at the library where I worked, a job my family mocked me for, saying a Brennan shouldn't lower herself to servant's work, even as they denied me access to any family funds that might have allowed me to do otherwise. Could you send me a copy of that signature?" 20 minutes later, I stared at my phone screen, looking at a signature that was almost mine but not quite. Celeste had always been gifted at forgery, a skill she'd used throughout our childhood to frame me for various transgressions. But this was beyond anything she'd done before. I called Mr. Ellsworth directly, using the personal number grandmother had given me years ago. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Lydia, I was wondering when you'd call. Your decision to forfeit your inheritance to your siblings was unexpected." "I never made that decision. I wasn't at the reading. That signature is forged." A long silence. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth. What did my grandmother leave me?" He sighed deeply. "Everything, Lydia. She left you everything. The entire Ilara Foundation, her investment portfolio, the properties in Switzerland and Japan, the art collection, all of it. Nearly $800 million in total assets." My knees buckled. I sank onto my tiny apartment's floor, the phone shaking in my hand. "And I supposedly gave it all up?" "According to the documents your family provided, you signed it over to them in exchange for a lump sum of $50,000, which they claim was already transferred to your account." "I never received anything. Check my bank records. I have $12 to my name." "Lydia?" His voice was sympathetic but firm. "The documents were notarized. Your family's lawyer, Marcus Brennan, handled everything personally. Without concrete proof of forgery, there's nothing I can do." "Uncle Marcus." Of course. The family's fixer, the one who'd made every problem disappear with a combination of legal manipulation and outright intimidation. He'd been father's brother, but more than that, he'd been the architect of every scheme that had kept me powerless and dependent. That night, I sat in my studio apartment, surrounded by the few possessions I'd managed to accumulate despite my family's interference. The irony wasn't lost on me. Grandmother had tried to save me, had left me everything I needed to escape and thrive, and they'd stolen even that. But she'd left me something else, something they didn't know about. I went to my closet and pulled out the music box she'd given me for my 10th birthday. While Celeste had received designer clothes and Julian got the latest gaming systems, I'd gotten this simple wooden box that played a hauntingly beautiful melody. My family had laughed at the cheap gift, but I'd treasured it. Now, 13 years later, I wound the key and let the melody play, running my fingers along the intricate carvings. There, a tiny latch I'd never noticed before. I pressed it and a hidden compartment opened, revealing a folded piece of paper and a small brass key. The note was in grandmother's handwriting. My dearest Lydia, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true and your family has found a way to steal what is rightfully yours. This key opens a safety deposit box at the Bank of Zurich, account number 77829914. Inside, you'll find something that will help you understand the true nature of your heritage and perhaps give you the power to reclaim what was taken. Remember, my darling girl, revenge is not about destruction. It's about balance. The universe demands payment for every cruelty, and sometimes we must be its collection agents. All my love, Grandmother Alara. I stared at the key, this tiny piece of metal that might hold my salvation. But Switzerland was impossibly far away for someone with $12 to her name. I needed money, and I needed it without alerting my family to my plans. That's when I remembered the photograph. 3 days later, I stood in the pawn shop on Mercy Street, the seediest part of town where my family would never venture. The owner, a grizzled man named Dimitri, examined the photograph through a jeweler's loupe. "This is authentic?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of an accent I couldn't place. "My grandmother took it herself, 1943, Berlin. You can see the marking on the back, her initials and the date." The photograph showed a young German officer sharing a drink with a man whose face would later become synonymous with evil. But more importantly, it showed something else in the background. A map with markings that historians had been searching for since the war's end. "This is worth considerably more than you're asking," Dimitri said carefully. "I only need enough for a plane ticket to Switzerland and a few days' accommodation. $5,000. He studied me with pale eyes that seemed to see too much. "You're Alara Volkov's granddaughter." I froze. Volkov. I'd never heard that name before. "She went by Alara Brennan after she married," I said cautiously. "She went by many names," Dimitri replied, pulling out a cash box from beneath the counter. "Your grandmother saved my grandfather's life in Prague. Got him and 12 other children out before the Nazis came." He counted out bills, then paused. "But you didn't know that, did you? Didn't know what she really was?" "What was she?" "Someone who balanced the scales," he said simply, adding more bills to the stack. "Someone who made sure evil men paid for their crimes, even when the law couldn't touch them." "Here, 10,000. You'll need more than just plane fare for what you're planning." "How do you know what I'm planning?" He smiled sadly. "Because you have her eyes, not the color, the look in them. The look of someone who's been pushed too far and has decided to push back. Be careful, little Volkov. That path leads to dark places." I took the money and left, his warning echoing in my mind. But I was already in a dark place, had been for years. The only difference now was that I might finally have a flashlight. The flight to Zurich felt like traveling between worlds. I'd never been on a plane before. My family had taken numerous vacations without me, always finding excuses to leave me behind. As I watched the clouds pass below, I thought about all the opportunities stolen from me, all the experiences denied. The Bank of Zurich was an imposing building of glass and stone, a monument to Swiss precision and discretion. The safety deposit box required not just the key, but also a password. I tried everything: birthdays, names, significant dates. Nothing worked. Finally, desperate, I hummed the melody from the music box. Ah, the bank manager said with a small smile. The Moonlight Requiem. Very few know that tune anymore. He entered a code and the box opened. Inside were three things: a leather journal, a USB drive, and a business card with only a phone number. I took everything back to my hotel room, a modest place near the train station, and opened the journal first. It was grandmother's, but not a diary. It was an instruction manual. The first entry was dated 50 years ago. The art of revenge is not in the grand gesture, but in the thousand small cuts that bleed a fortune dry. Today, I begin documenting the methods by which the powerful can be brought low, not through violence. That's too quick, too merciful, but through the slow dismantling of everything they've built on the backs of others. I read through the night, discovering a woman I'd never known existed. Grandmother hadn't just been wealthy. She'd been a force of nature, a vigilante in designer clothes who'd spent decades secretly destroying those who preyed on the innocent. The journal contained detailed accounts of how she'd toppled corrupt businessmen, exposed predatory religious leaders, and ruined politicians who'd used their power to harm others. But more than that, it contained information about my family that made my blood run cold. My father, William Brennan, hadn't built his fortune through clever investments, as he claimed. He'd built it by betraying grandmother's connections, selling information about her network to the very people she was trying to bring down. Julian, my brother, had been groomed from childhood to take over this operation, taught to view people as commodities to be traded and discarded. And Celeste, beautiful, popular Celeste, had been selling herself to the highest bidder since she was 16, not out of necessity but out of greed, using the information she gathered from powerful men to blackmail them later. But it was the information about Uncle Marcus that truly horrified me. Marcus Brennan wasn't just the family lawyer, he was a fixer for the East Coast's most dangerous crime families, a man who'd made his fortune ensuring that murderers walked free and witnesses disappeared. The journal contained dates, names, and locations, enough evidence to put him away for life if it reached the right hands. But grandmother hadn't acted on it. Why? The answer was in the final entry, dated just a month before her death. I have failed Lydia. In trying to protect her from the family's corruption, I've left her vulnerable to their cruelty. I see now that my revenge must be her inheritance, not just my wealth, which they will surely try to steal, but my knowledge, my methods, and most importantly, my connections. Lydia, if you're reading this, know that the number on the card will connect you to the Covenant, a network of those who've been wronged and have chosen to fight back. They will help you, but only if you're willing to help yourself. Your family took my fortune through legal channels they've corrupted. Take it back through channels they can't even imagine exist. The USB contains everything you need to access my real fortune. Not the money in banks they know about, but the cryptocurrency wallets, the offshore accounts, the shell companies. Together, it totals nearly $2 billion. They thought they were stealing $800 million, but that was just what I wanted them to see. Use it wisely. Use it completely. And remember, the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served at exactly the right temperature to burn everything down. I held the USB drive like it was a live grenade. $2 billion, enough to destroy my family 1,000 times over. But first, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I called the number on the card. Yes, the voice was cultured, feminine, ageless. My name is Lydia Brennan. Alara Volkov was my grandmother. A pause. We've been expecting your call. How may the Covenant assist you? My family stole my inheritance through forged documents. My uncle, Marcus Brennan, facilitated it. Marcus Brennan. The way she said his name made it sound like profanity. Yes, we're familiar with his work. He's caused several of our members significant pain. What do you propose? I want to hire someone. Someone who can remove him from the equation. You want him killed? I want him stopped. Permanently, the method is negotiable. She laughed, a sound like silver bells. How refreshingly honest. There's a man in your city. He goes by the name Ashford. He specializes in permanent solutions that don't always involve death. Sometimes living with the consequences is worse than dying. I'll arrange a meeting. What will it cost? Everything you have and nothing you'll miss. Ashford has his own way of determining payment. Be at the Riverside Chapel at midnight tomorrow. Come alone and bring proof of what your uncle has done. Not to you, but to others. He doesn't take cases based on personal vendettas alone. The line went dead. I spent the next 24 hours in Zurich accessing the accounts on the USB. The process was labyrinthine, requiring passwords hidden in the journal, authenticator apps downloaded to burner phones, and even a DNA sample at one particularly paranoid Swiss bank. But by the time I boarded the plane back home, I had access to everything. $2 billion, enough to buy and sell my family 100 times over. But I didn't transfer any of it. Not yet. I wanted them to think they'd won, to get comfortable in their stolen luxury. The fall would be that much harder. The Riverside Chapel was a ruin on the outskirts of the city, abandoned since a fire had consumed it decades ago. I arrived at midnight exactly, carrying a briefcase full of evidence about Marcus's crimes. Not his crimes against me, but against the dozens of families he'd destroyed to protect his clients. Ashford was already there, sitting in what had once been the first pew. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 35, with silver-streaked hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He didn't look like an assassin. He looked like a university professor or a hedge fund manager. "Ms. Brennan," he said without turning around. "Or should I say Ms. Volkov?" "Brennan is fine. I haven't earned the other name yet." He turned then, studying me with those unsettling eyes. "Your grandmother would disagree. She spoke of you often in her communications with the Covenant. She believed you had the potential to be greater than she ever was. She never told me any of this, about the Covenant, about what she really did. Because she hoped you'd never need to know. She wanted a normal life for you, free from the shadows she inhabited. But your family made that impossible, didn't they?" I set the briefcase on the pew beside him. "Everything's in there. Marcus Brennan's greatest hits: murder, extortion, witness tampering, jury intimidation, evidence destruction, 30 years of crimes." He didn't open it. "I don't need to see it. I've been documenting Marcus Brennan for 15 years, waiting for someone with standing to request his removal." He stood, towering over me at well over 6 feet. "But I should warn you, removing Marcus won't get your inheritance back. The legal documents will still stand." "I don't want my inheritance back. I have something better. I have my grandmother's real fortune, the one they don't know exists. I want Marcus removed because he's the cornerstone holding their house of cards together. Without him, they'll scramble, make mistakes, reveal their true natures to the world. And then I'll destroy them systematically using every technique my grandmother documented, every connection she cultivated, every secret she uncovered." He smiled, and it was terrifying and beautiful at once. "Now you sound like a Volkov." "Very well, I'll take the contract. The payment is $1. I blinked. $1? I choose my own payments, remember? Sometimes it's millions. Sometimes it's a favor to be claimed later. In your case, it's $1, but it must be the last dollar you possess. You must be willing to give everything for this revenge, even if it means having nothing." That's insane. That's commitment. Your grandmother understood this. She once paid me with her last breath, literally held her breath until she nearly passed out, offering her life itself for the contract. I released her from it, of course, but the gesture proved her dedication. I thought about the $12 in my bank account, the only money I had that wasn't from grandmother's secret fortune. My last connection to my old life, my safety net if everything went wrong. "When do you need it?" "When the job is done. You'll know when that is." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Your family is having a celebration next week, aren't they? To commemorate their newfound wealth?" "How did you know?" "I make it my business to know. They've rented out the Harbinger estate for a masked ball. Every corrupt official, every dirty lawyer, every crime family connection will be there. Marcus is providing the security, ensuring no uninvited guests disturb their triumph. I wasn't invited. No, but Lydia Brennan wasn't invited. Natasha Volkov, however, a wealthy Eastern European investor interested in partnering with Marcus Brennan, has already RSVP'd. He handed me an invitation on cream-colored paper, the name Natasha Volkov written in golden script. The covenant takes care of its own. There's a dress waiting for you at the Mandarin Hotel, room 2012. Shoes, jewelry, everything you need to become someone else for one night. Consider it a loan against future services. What kind of services? The kind your grandmother used to provide. The covenant isn't a charity. It's a network of mutual benefit. We help you destroy those who wronged you, and someday you help someone else do the same. The cycle of justice continues. After he left, I stood in that ruined chapel, holding the invitation that would put me in the same room as my tormentors for the first time since they'd stolen everything from me. But now I had weapons they couldn't imagine, knowledge, resources, and an assassin who worked for the price of a single dollar. The week passed in a blur of preparation. I accessed enough of grandmother's hidden fortune to establish myself as Natasha Volkov, complete with a fabricated history that would withstand any scrutiny. The Covenant's forgers were artists, creating documents that showed Natasha as the heir to a mining fortune, educated at Oxford, with business interests that would naturally align with what Marcus offered, money laundering through art sales. The dress that waited for me at the Mandarin was a work of art itself, black silk that seemed to absorb light with diamonds sewn into the fabric that caught the eye just enough to distract from the face above. The mask that accompanied it was a masterpiece of Venetian craftsmanship, covering everything but my eyes and lips. I'd lost weight in the months since discovering the theft, stress, and poverty carving away the softness that had made me look younger than my years. Now, with professional makeup and the kind of clothes I'd only dreamed of wearing, I was unrecognizable. The mirror showed me someone else entirely, someone dangerous, powerful, untouchable. Someone like grandmother must have been. The Harbinger estate was a monument to excess, a Gilded Age mansion that had been preserved as a venue for those wealthy enough to afford its rental. As my hired car pulled up to the entrance, I saw them, my family, greeting guests at the door like royalty receiving their subjects. Father had gained weight, his tuxedo straining at the buttons. The stolen millions agreed with him. Mother stood beside him, dripping in jewelry that I recognized from grandmother's collection, pieces that should have been mine. Julian looked bored, checking his phone every few seconds, probably tracking his cryptocurrency investments made with my money. And Celeste. Beautiful Celeste in a red dress that cost more than I'd made in a year at the library, laughing with a senator's son who didn't know he was being evaluated as her next mark. Marcus stood apart from them, watching everything with the cold eyes of a predator. He was the real power here, the one who'd made it all possible. Without him, they were just grifters with delusions of grandeur. With him, they were untouchable. Or so they thought. I approached with the confidence grandmother's journal had taught me to project. "Mr. Brennan," I said to Marcus, my voice pitched lower than usual with a slight accent I'd practiced all week. "Natasha Volkov, I believe we have mutual interest to discuss." His eyes lit up with greed. "Ms. Volkov, I was hoping you'd attend. Your reputation precedes you." The Covenant had done their work well, seeding stories about Natasha in all the right circles, a woman with more money than sense, looking for ways to clean her fortune through American investments. "Perhaps we could speak privately," I suggested, glancing meaningfully at the crowd. "I have a proposition that requires discretion." "Of course. There's a study on the second floor. We won't be disturbed." As we walked through the party, I passed within inches of my mother. She looked right through me, her eyes sliding over my face without a flicker of recognition. 23 years of raising me, or failing to, and she couldn't recognize her own daughter behind a mask and expensive clothes. The study was exactly what I'd expected, all dark wood and leather, designed to intimidate. Marcus poured himself a whiskey, offering me one that I declined. So, Ms. Volkov, what brings you to our little celebration? Opportunity, I replied, settling into a chair with practiced elegance. I have assets that need to become legitimate. You have the connections to make that happen. It seems like a natural partnership. Assets from your mining operations? Among other things, the collapse of the Soviet Union left many opportunities for those brave enough to seize them. My family was aggressive in our acquisitions. He leaned forward, interested. How aggressive are we talking? 9 figures that need to become clean, preferably through art purchases, charitable donations, real estate investments, the usual channels. That can be arranged, for a fee, of course. Of course, 20%? 30. The risk is considerable. I pretended to consider this. 25, and you provide additional services beyond the laundering. What kind of services? The kind you provided for the Brennan family recently? I understand you helped them secure a rather substantial inheritance through creative documentation. His eyes narrowed. I don't discuss other clients' business. Admirable, but I'm not asking for details. I'm asking if you can provide similar creativity for my needs. There are several relatives in Moscow who might contest my claim to the family fortune. It would be convenient if documentation existed showing they'd already relinquished their claims. He relaxed, smiling. That's certainly within my capabilities. In fact, I have a notary who specializes in such matters. Very discreet, very thorough. The same one who handled the Brennan inheritance matter? Among others. He took another sip of whiskey. You've done your homework. I never enter a business arrangement uninformed. Speaking of which, I should mention that I've had dealings with Alara Brennan, or rather, Alara Volkov, as she was known in certain circles. Marcus went very still. You knew Alara? Our grandmothers were cousins. Both fled Russia during the revolution. Both built their fortunes from nothing. Alara always spoke highly of her granddaughter, said she was the only honest soul in a family of thieves. Lydia was a disappointment, Marcus said flatly. Weak, ungrateful, lacking in ambition. Alara's fortune was wasted on her. And yet she inherited everything. A mistake that's been corrected. The money is in hands that know how to use it now. I stood, moving to the window that overlooked the party below. And Lydia? What became of her? Who knows? Who cares? She's probably crying in her pathetic apartment, serving coffee to people who matter. She was never meant for this world. No, I agreed. She wasn't. That's when I saw Ashford. He was dressed as a server, moving through the crowd with a tray of champagne. No one looked at him twice. The help was invisible at parties like this. He paused near the grand staircase, looking up at the study window. Our eyes met through the glass, and he raised his tray slightly in acknowledgement. I should return to the party, I said, turning back to Marcus, but I'd like to continue this discussion. Perhaps dinner tomorrow? I'll have my secretary call you. He stood, moving closer than propriety allowed. I have a feeling this will be a very profitable partnership, Ms. Volkov. More than you know, I replied, stepping past him toward the door. As I descended the stairs, I watched Ashford work. He wasn't just serving drinks, he was placing something in each glass he offered, something that dissolved instantly. But he wasn't poisoning anyone. That would be too crude, too traceable. I understood when I saw him approach the circuit breaker. The lights went out all at once, plunging the estate into darkness. There were screams, confusion, the crash of breaking glass. Emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. That's when the revelations began. Marcus's phone, which he'd left on the desk in the study, began broadcasting to every Bluetooth speaker in the house. A conversation he'd recorded of himself instructing a witness to lie or face the consequences. Then another recording, this one of him discussing the murder of a prosecutor who'd gotten too close to one of his clients. But it wasn't just Marcus. Every phone in the building had been hacked, their darkest secrets spilling out for all to hear. Celeste's voice filled the air, negotiating the price for spending a weekend with a married judge. Julian could be heard arranging the purchase of stolen credit card information. My father's voice boomed through the speakers, describing how he'd embezzled from grandmother's charity foundation even before she died. And through it all, a video played on every screen in the house. Security footage from 3 weeks ago showing my family in Ellsworth's office, Celeste signing my name on document after document, while they all laughed about how stupid I was, how I'd never even know what I'd lost. The party descended into chaos. The senator's son was screaming at Celeste, calling her a whore. Julian was being restrained by security as he tried to destroy the screens. My parents were surrounded by former friends demanding explanations, apologies, their money back from various schemes now exposed. But Marcus was the focal point of the disaster. As the lights flickered back on, federal agents flooded the estate. Someone, Ashford, of course, had ensured they received the evidence at exactly the right moment, complete with warrants and probable cause. I watched from the garden as they led Marcus away in handcuffs. He saw me standing there, and for a moment our eyes met. I pulled off my mask, letting him see my face, letting him understand who had orchestrated his downfall. "Lydia," he gasped. I smiled, the same sweet smile I'd given him as a child when he told me I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything. "Natasha Volkov," I corrected. "Lydia Brennan is dead. You killed her when you stole her life." The aftermath was delicious in its completeness. Marcus was denied bail. The judge deemed him a flight risk given his connections and resources. The FBI seized all his assets under RICO statutes, including the money he'd been managing for my family. Without his protection, without his connections, they were exposed for what they truly were: small-time grifters who'd gotten lucky. The stolen inheritance was frozen pending investigation. The forged documents Celeste had created became evidence in a federal fraud case. The IRS, alerted to discrepancies in their suddenly lavish lifestyle, began an audit that revealed years of tax evasion. But I wasn't done, not nearly. Using grandmother's connections and resources, I began buying up their debts, the mortgage on the house they'd purchased with my money, the loans they'd taken out for cars, jewelry, luxuries they couldn't actually afford without Marcus laundering money for them. Every credit card, every line of credit, every financial obligation they had became mine. And then I called them in, all at once. They had 72 hours to pay back everything or face foreclosure, repossession, and bankruptcy. Celeste came to my apartment first, though she didn't know it was mine. I'd purchased the entire building through a shell company, renovated the penthouse, and made sure word reached her that the owner might be willing to negotiate if she was accommodating. She arrived dressed to seduce, clearly planning to use her usual tactics. The look on her face when I opened the door was priceless. "Hello, sister." She actually tried to run, but I'd locked the elevator. "Sit down, Celeste. We need to talk." "You did this. You destroyed everything." "No, I revealed everything. There's a difference." "Tea?" She sat because she had no choice, her hands shaking as she accepted the cup. "How? You had nothing. You were nobody." "I had everything. I was somebody. You just couldn't see it through your greed." I pulled out a folder, thick with documents. "Sign these." "What are they?" "Confessions. Every crime you've committed, every person you've blackmailed, every marriage you've destroyed. Sign them and I'll give you enough money to start over somewhere else. Refuse, and I'll release the other recordings, the ones that weren't played at the party." "What other recordings?" I pulled out my phone, played a few seconds of audio, Celeste discussing how she'd drugged men to get compromising photos, how she'd threatened to cry rape if they didn't pay. "You were always so careful to record your conquests for blackmail purposes," I said. "But you never noticed that grandmother's jewelry, the pieces you stole from her room, had recording devices in them." "She knew what you were, Celeste. She documented everything." Celeste signed. She had no choice. Julian came next, full of rage and threats. He'd always been the most violent of them, the one who'd left bruises when we were children, who'd broken my arm accidentally when I was 12. "I'll kill you," he snarled, pacing my penthouse like a caged animal. "No, you won't." Ashford stepped out from the other room and Julian went pale. Even he could recognize a predator greater than himself. "Sign the confessions," I said calmly, "or Mr. Ashford here will ensure you're arrested for the assault and battery of 3 different women, all of whom are now willing to testify thanks to the generous settlements I've provided them." "You can't prove—" "I can. Grandmother had you followed for years, Julian. She knew what you did to those girls, just like she knew what you did to me. Every hospital visit, every police report that was mysteriously lost, every witness who was paid to forget. She documented it all." He signed, his hand shaking with suppressed violence. Mother came third, trying to play the maternal card. "Lydia, sweetheart, we can work this out. We're family." "We were never family. Family doesn't lock a child in a closet for days. Family doesn't tell a little girl she's worthless, ugly, unwanted. Family doesn't steal her inheritance and laugh about it. We gave you everything you needed. You gave me trauma that took years of therapy to process. You gave me self-doubt that nearly killed me. You gave me every reason to become exactly what I am now. Your worst nightmare." She broke down crying, but I felt nothing. 23 years of emotional manipulation had inoculated me against her tears. Father came last, trying to negotiate to make a deal. "You've made your point, Lydia. We wronged you, but destroying us won't make you happy." "You're right," I agreed. "It won't make me happy, but it will make me free. Sign of the papers. And if I refuse, then I release everything about your dealings with Marcus's clients. The prosecutors are very interested in anyone who helped launder money for the Torino crime family. You could be looking at 20 years. He signed. With their confessions in hand, I had everything I needed. But there was one more piece to put in place. The auction was held at Christie's, advertised as the estate sale of the century. Every piece of art, every jewel, every treasure my family had stolen was up for bid. But what they didn't know was that I was the buyer, using different shell companies for each purchase, driving the prices up until my family thought they were saved. The money would clear their debts, pay their lawyers, give them a fresh start. Except it wouldn't. Every payment bounced. Every wire transfer was reversed. Because 2 hours before the auction ended, the FBI arrested all 4 of them on federal charges based on their signed confessions. Their assets were frozen, the auction voided, and everything they thought they'd sold reverted to the estate, which, through a complex series of legal maneuvers the Covenant's lawyers had arranged, now belonged entirely to me as grandmother's sole legitimate heir.